But here I have the LSB on the left side and then the King James Version on the far right.
Okay. Whoa.
Yeah.
So the LSB says in Revelation 16:5.
What is this? What is that? LSB. What is that?
Legacy Standard
Legacy.
Bible.
What?
Legacy Standard Bible.
That's
I've
the
never
weird
heard of that.
version the Calvinists are reading
I've
these
never
days.
heard. Oh gosh, don't
Actually,
start
Sam
that.
Shamu reads that
Wow.
one.
Oh boy. Okay.
It's
I love
a
Sam,
really
but I don't
literal
agree with him on
translation,
everything.
but it says, and I heard the angel of the waters saying, "Righteous are you, who is and who was, O Holy One, because you judge these things." Okay. And in the King James Version, this is what it says. And I heard the angel of the waters say, "Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and wast and shalt be,
Yeah.
because thou hast judged this."
Uh-huh.
And so the question that I was wanting to ask was concerning this phrase, "O Holy One."
Mm-hmm.
The King James Version translates it
Not there. I don't see it in there.
and
Where's
shall
the
be.
original?
And the original, here's, you have the Textus Receptus. Here you have the Greek New Testament.
Heck no, I'm not a fluent Greek speaker. Thanks, pseudonym though.
But in the Nesialan 28th edition, it says ha hasamenas. Well, hasias is the term.
Yeah, I need
that
I
term
need I need one of those
is The Holy
translators.
One, essentially, the one who is holy.
Okay.
Right.
In the Textus Receptus, you have ha esamenas, which is and shall be, the future form of will be.
Yeah, I'm a little wondering why. Okay, what verse in Revelation was that? I'm sorry.
Revelation 16:5.
16. Okay.
Yeah. I just find this interesting because when I was doing my studies on this, I seriously could not find a single Greek manuscript that had this until Beza.
That's why I'm looking the original. Oh, excuse me, I got the hiccups. I need some mustard. All right, let's see. Heard the voice great of the temple singing to the seven. All right, I'm gonna look through this and I'm gonna get back to you in a second. But what's interesting is you've got there, they've got the past, present, and future tense, which in the purpose of that usually is to prove he is the self-existing, always existing, and always will exist God, right? So I mean, I have no problem with Holy One, but I don't see that there. But I'll look.
So John, let me ask you. You got 4 different versions up on the screen. How do you know which version is the right version?
Well, there's no like wrong version. It's just you got to study to when you're getting deep into it, because there's nothing wrong with any of those words in any of those translations.
I think you got to be careful, because if they're changing words and changing meanings, it actually warns directly against that in the Bible.
Yeah, it actually does. But here's the thing, we can't use exact words sometimes because we don't have the same colorful language as Koine Greek. So we have to do the best we can with the language that's being translated. But the fact that they show us the original text to go through, it shows we can compare it. And so, but what I find with the King James and Young's literal is they're very, very close. And there's no actual doctrine change. Like, it doesn't deny Jesus's divinity. It doesn't deny his humanity. It doesn't deny the prophecies of him, and it doesn't deny how we're saved. So,
the safest bet is to go with the King James version.
Well, the reason why I found this to be an interesting question, and this is not simply to try to split hairs with King James version people. You know, I'm not like that, but. This last phrase, because you judge these things, I think that makes the most sense when he says, "Oh, Holy One," because he's holy, he judges righteously.
Yes,
and so I think that makes the most sense here in this text when he's talking about his nature.
What word is that you're looking at in Greek? Which word is it that you're seeing? What is it?
Yeah, Hosios.
Yeah, and that term
Hosios.
HOS. Yeah, I don't see that here. I don't see it.
Right, you're probably looking in the Textus Receptus where it says esamenas, right? Ha esamenas, and that term is in the Textus Receptus. But
Being is a present tense being.
The imperfect, yeah. But when you have that term, my contention is I don't see that prior to Beza. I think Beza made a conjectural emendation here, where he looked at the form of the word and decided. I think this should be the future form of to be.
I do too. That's what I see in the Greek here.
And if he did that, then that's actually
who translated that you're talking about.
Right. So I take that to be
version are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about the Textus Receptus here, where it says ha esomenos. Yes. I believe that's a mistake.
It's written
down. Actually, Renee, we have a Textus Receptus scholar. I mean, I put him on the level of a scholar. I think he is actually a scholar on the manuscripts. Nick Sayers. I mean, this guy is debated against several non-KJV. He's an incredible defender. Hey, Nick, welcome. We appreciate you coming in here.
Yes, thank you.
But here's the problem with Nick Sayers. The English is not inspired. What's inspired is the majority manuscripts. The KJV,
right, of course, I believe that.
Outdated English, so words change meaning and things like that. So the King James isn't perfect, but the manuscript tradition it comes from, I think that right.
I agree with you on that. I because I did, we were talking. It's without error, and I'm like, nah, not really, not really. Sorry, but the original is.
For example. What is it? Isaiah, I think, where it uses the word churches.
By Independent Fundamental Baptist, if I even mention that they could have some improvement in some places. That's all.
Yeah,
it could be clearer in a couple ways.
Well, I would like to hear what Nick has to say really quick, though.
Yeah, so would I. But it's a good translation to me. It's a very good one.
Yeah, if you could just give me a little bit of time, praise. I'd like to explain about Revelation 16:5.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Great.
Nick. Thank you so much.
So I wrote a book on Revelation 16:5, and basically what I found was every manuscript has an allusion to the reading. Now, it has the name of Jehovah in that verse. So the one which was and is to come is the etymology of the name of Jehovah. So Hebrew has the word hava, which means to be or to exist. So when you get the name of the etymology of Jehovah, there's three parts to it. Three I ams, the past, the present, and the future. These all appear in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14.
May I ask a question on that? When he said, tell them I am sent you, or I am that I am, is that what he's saying?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
and so,
all right.
If you look at, say, Nehemiah Gordon's material, he's a Hebrew expert. He says exactly the same thing. And we came to this conclusion separately. And so the etymology or the building blocks of the name of Jehovah is the three I ams. In that verse, it's the past, the present, and the future. The name Jehovah itself means to be or to exist. And in Revelation 16:5, we have the one which is and was and will be or shall be in the King James. And so that's the holiest name of God. So that's why they put holy there. So it's a form of nomina sacra. So nomina sacra is when you have a name like Jesus and you contract it and maybe put a line above it. And it might just say you or something like that, or just two letters, or theos becomes a theta and a sigma. With this whole big long name, the noun phrase, the past, the present, and the future, scribes struggled to figure out what to do with it. So they actually just put holy on the end of it there. So in some manuscripts, it has, in all the Greek manuscripts, it basically says the one which was and is and holy, which doesn't really make much sense because it's a name. It's the name of Jehovah. We know what the etymology of the name of Jehovah is. It's the one which was and is and shall be. But to the scribes, this was way too holy to allow to just be open for people, because this was part of their sacred thing that they said in the temple. they would say the names of I am, the past, the present, and the future, and they would say Jehovah. And that's what they did in the temple. And for Jewish scribes to see this in open manuscripts in Christian documents, it was a bit too much for them. So they had holy put there. So knowing that that's the name of God, knowing it's a nomina sacra, it clears up everything. And Theodore Beza himself, I know it was said before that it was a conjectural emendation. We retranslated the annotations of Theodore Beza in his 1598 edition. That's the Greek edition that backs up the King James. And he clearly said he had an ancient manuscript of good faith, and it had the exact reading of Esomenos in that. So it's definitely not a conjectural emendation. It's backed up by ancient manuscripts, but also if you know that it's the name of Jehovah there, it clears up a lot of those issues as well.
See, I'm not as dumb as I look.
Fantastic.
I told you that whenever they say it, they proclaim that he's pre-existing, he's existing now, and he always will exist. So to have one of those missing to me was weird.
Jehovah
and you cleared it up. I'm so excited. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hold on. It still doesn't fix the issue, though. Because when you look at that text, where is that manuscript that he says?
He just told you why they put it there, because the Jewish scribes didn't want the full name written out like it's written. And was and is right. and is to come, so they just put the Holy One there.
So my question is, where in the, because he said that there was an early manuscript that actually had this reading. What is that reading, Nick? I'm asking, where is that reading?
Yeah,
because
and so
I don't see it.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And what most people go with today are what we would call them extant manuscripts, or manuscripts we can actually hold in our hands. But even Dan Wallace, he said that 1 million biblical manuscripts were destroyed in World War II alone. So we're actually losing manuscripts. We've been leaking out manuscripts since the Reformation. There are manuscripts that we don't know Erasmus had, like this manuscript of Beza. I talk to scholars all the time and say,
Allah Akbar,
and they don't know. And so we've actually lost so many manuscripts. And so what we have to do then is go by what the scholars say in their annotations, in their commentaries, in their written material. Like say Jerome, he would mention certain things about the woman caught in adultery. And we have to go by what he says, because we just don't have manuscripts from those eras. And the manuscripts...
Allah Akbar.
Stop, Numi. That's disrespectful, man. Be courteous.
Yeah,
all right. May peace and blessings be upon you. I'm going to go now.
Later.
Yeah, have a blessed night, man. God bless.
Yeah, so hopefully that answers you. We don't have the manuscript that Beza talked about today, but he did say it was a good and faithful manuscript, and he used that for that reading. So it's definitely not a conjectural emendation. James White in his book says it's a conjecture. It's not. We've proven him wrong on many points. And I actually wrote a book about this, so that's why I know.
But that's amazing. He actually wrote the literal book on this issue. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But that's an issue that I'm gonna have. That's just a claim. That's not a source to a primary reading that.
But isn't it just when it in the Greek, when it's saying the was, is, and in future, isn't that enough to assume, because they don't like to put that out, that they would put Holy One there? I mean, that's reasonable.
Given
even
that
apply
it could be, if all the earliest manuscripts didn't read Ha-Hasias, the Holy One, where they all said that, and not
he said that's why they replace it with that. They replace it with that so that they don't put was and is to come, which is literally his name, and they put his name down.
And so what's more probable, though, in terms of the historical accounting of what was actually copied versus the opinion of someone later on about what they were doing to justify this new reading.
Well, it would make sense to me if
John,
the scribes were scared to write that out. Most of the scribes.
Well, Renee, let Nick have a back and forth with John. I want to hear this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, John, the first ever nomina sacra was to do with the name of Jehovah. The theophoric names, which are names like Jehoshaphat, Jehoiakim, they all have the name Jeho in it. Now, at some stage in the biblical period, they actually changed those to Josaphat, Joachim, and they dropped the Jeho sound to just have Josaphat instead of Jehoshaphat. That's the first ever nomina sacra. They did that because they were worried about saying the name of Jehovah at the wrong place or at the wrong time, because one of the commandments is don't take the name of the Lord, Jehovah, in vain. And so the theophoric names were shortened. And so in the Bible, they appear in both forms, in the long form and in the short form. Right. And so what we see in the New Testament, say Matthew 1:1, it says, Vivlos genesios Jesu Christu, uio David, uio Abraham. So the Jesu Christu there in the biblical manuscripts is usually just two letters, the first letter and the last letter of Jesus' name with a line above it. And so basically this is called nomina sacra. So the first ever nomina sacra was to do with Jehovah. And so knowing that Revelation 16:5 has the name of Jehovah in it, if you apply the same rules to this verse as they do to Old Testament translations, for example, say the Septuagint, they have like kurios. It would just be like the K and the sigma with a line above it, and that would show that it means Lord. And that's how they translate the holy names of God. And so Jehovah is almost always contracted in some sort of form. So knowing that this is the name of Jehovah here in Revelation 16:5, the past, present, and the future, which exposes the etymology of Jehovah, the three I ams, it's almost like this is radioactive for Jews. You know, they don't even write God in English without sometimes a hyphen. They get rid of the O and put a hyphen there. You know, oftentimes they'll call God the Hashem, just the name and things like this.
Yeah.
And so it's a very sacred thing. So to have holy there, and we see in the Ethiopic manuscript, which is before Theodore Beza, it has the future form there of Isomenos. We see in Hymo Halberstadensis and Beatus of Libana. So these are commentators around the 8th and 9th century. They have the reading in their commentary, also talking about the three aspects there, the past, the present, and the future. And so basically you've got the etymology of a name of God. You would think that it would have the whole name there, but it has holy on the end. Understanding that in the Old Testament, they oftentimes would contract the name of Jehovah because they're worried about people saying it at the wrong place at the wrong time. In translations, like into the Septuagint, they turn it into a nomina sacra. In the New Testament, they did that as well. They had names of Jesus and God and Lord in nomina sacra. So it's not a surprise to find the holiest name of God. This is probably the holiest name of God in the whole New Testament, except for I am. But this is actually the I am is the etymology of Jehovah. And so having this whole big long noun phrase, you can't really just get the first letter and the last letter and put a line above it. So what do? They chopped out the last bit and put holy there.
Well, obviously, that assumes the original reading off the bat, but I agree with the point you're making. I'm just not sure how you're getting that from Ha-Hasias. Where in Ha-Hasias do you see the contracted form of Isomenos?
So the
quick question: would you guys be willing to debate this?
It's not a debate.
I'd be willing to consider it, but I would prefer to just have a discussion with him, to be honest.
Because I'm sure Donny would love to host a debate if you wanted to do it.
Well, I just think he wants an answer, right? I mean, you want to understand it better more than.
Yeah, I just want to hear where. Yeah, I'm not even here to like try to look. If that's the original rating, I'm down for it. What I want to, my motivation is to believe what the original authors actually wrote, and so if they actually wrote, and shall be, I want that to be in my Bible. And so I would be happy to accept that as the proper translation.
He's a very literal person, aren't you? You're a very literal person. Yes.
Well, yeah. So for me, I really want to be faithful to that. And so if that's what it is, I'm happy to grab onto it. Just for me at the moment, I don't see good enough evidence for it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think you will find it, will you? I mean, since the scribes didn't want to write it out.
And what I'd say, John, it's actually just an understanding of nomina sacra and what it is. Where say in Matthew 1:1, like I mentioned, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. If we were to read it literally as the Greek says, we would say, Vivlos Genesios Abraham.
Yeah, I recognize that. I'm aware of these.
And so you have to expand those words, the nomina sacra, to say, Jesus Christ. Even the Son is nomina sacra in that verse. And so most of the manuscripts have that. Most of the Byzantine manuscripts have nomina sacra. And so, but in almost all of the Bibles, it's always expanded. When it came to Theodore Beza, he understood this as a nomina sacra, and he's just expanded it. Because it's a name, we already know what the name of Jehovah is and the etymology behind the name. And so it's not like we have to figure it out. And he also said he had an ancient manuscript that read like that. So he went with that, understanding that the rest of them that have Hosios, holy, is a substitution to alert people that this is the holiest name of God.
Well, I hope you understand why, to me, that's not convincing, right? Like, I hope you understand. Like, to me, saying that there is a manuscript out there that is there, but we just don't have it anymore.
No, that's not really what he's saying. I didn't think. I think he's saying that the scribes did not write that name, and they almost always used a replacement for that name so that his sacred name just wouldn't be out there. It was only spoken in the temple. So whenever you see it written this way, it is inferred that is what it means. The God's holy name is right here.
But my question is, like, originally, in terms of what the apostles originally wrote, was that Ha-Isamenas or Ha-Hagias, right? And his claim is the original one is Ha-Isamenas. And that's where I'm asking if there is one out there that he was pointing to, which is what he said. There was an ancient manuscript that he was pointing to and that he considered to be reliable, which is why he used that in his rendering. Then that's fine. But I hope he knows why that's not convincing to me.
Okay.
Yeah, and we all want every manuscript that's ever existed to still be around today. But even Erasmus's manuscript, I heard you guys talking before about the last 6 verses of the book of Revelation. And even the document that they say Erasmus used, that went missing for 250 years. And a man called Franz Delitzsch found that in about 1840. So scholars know that these manuscripts go missing. And then, but they found this manuscript. They claimed that it was the one Erasmus used, but I don't think it was at all. And because it has 6 entire verses missing, where Erasmus said there was a few words missing. So there's 136 words missing on this document. And so they've claimed that this Erasmus used it. And so basically this was used disprove Erasmus and say that he was a liar, that he lied about his evidence. And so this was actually used in evidence against the Textus Receptus. And so this obviously led to the Westcott and Hort text, people like Tischendorf and many others. And so the mindset in England was that, Erasmus lied to us in his annotations, where when you just question everything like everyone should do, you go through this and you realize that, hang on, they've found a manuscript. There was a manuscript collector called Reuchlin. Now, Reuchlin, he was an expert in Hebrew, but he got demonized by the Catholic Church for looking at the Kabbalah and other things. But he was just trying to understand the language. And obviously, the Jews don't just have the Bible. They have a whole bunch of stuff that can be satanic and all the rest of it. So he was looking at everything, trying to figure it all out. But he lent a manuscript to Erasmus, and it had the one that they found just had Reuchlin's name on it. And it's a very similar one to Erasmus, the one that Erasmus has, but I don't think it's the exact same one, because he was a manuscript collector. He could have had 15 of these, 10 of these. There's 200 in existence today of these type of manuscripts that Reuchlin had. And so these are the Andreas commentaries. So it was an Andreas commentary, and it was owned by Reuchlin, but he could have had 5 of these, 10, 2 of these. We don't know. And so people are they're just saying, well, it has Reuchlin's name on it. It must have been the one that Erasmus used. And so they throw Erasmus under the bus, and they say the Textus Receptus is full of lies. He back translated from the Latin. This is what they say in the last
Catholics didn't want it. Catholics came across against the Bible because of they don't want people to trust in Scripture alone, for one.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
but hey Nick, I just want to let you know I appreciate you. I disagree with you, but I hope you know I'm just like you. I want to get into these issues and really try to seek out the truth on these areas. So if you would want to come on my podcast at some time, man, I would love to have a discussion with you more on this, and maybe we can look at the manuscripts together and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's just brilliant.
I can send you or anyone who wants it, I can send you a free PDF or Word document of the draft of the book, and so that way you can look at what I've said yourself. I wrote it in 2019. There's been a lot more evidence that's come out since then about Beza saying that he had an ancient manuscript. I didn't know that up until about 4 years ago. And so, but yeah, so I've debated on this. I've talked to lots of people on this. And so, but yeah, if anyone wants that Word document, just contact me. I'm available on Facebook, and maybe
kind.
I'm putting my email in the chat.
Oh yeah, cool.
If you don't mind, you could send it to me on there. But
I'm reading your
the dialogue, man.
Article.
It's really rare to come across people who have actually looked into these things as much as some of us have. It's
amazing.
Really so amazing. I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, cheers. No worries, John.
Nick, who is the gentleman that there was a big deal because he went and he found some manuscript in the Holy Land, and it was in a fireplace that a monk had it, and they were using it for with firewood to start fires, to kindle fires, and he had a guy that he was fighting with that was an expert, and he was like, no, this is not an original. I wrote this myself, and I left it at the monk's place, and he was passing it off as an original. And there was a big fight because this was what, 1600s maybe, where the Catholic Church was trying to come against the Textus Receptus. And so they had their people, I guess it's Westcott and Hort, writing something. And then there was this big fight. Do you know what I'm talking about? The guy said he found it at this monk's place in Israel, and he took it out of the fire, and it still had like some burn marks on it. But there was another guy, and the poor guy got accused of being a fraud, and he dealt in antique manuscripts, and it was all in the public, in the papers, against each other. because the one guy, was like, no, I found he wasn't lying, but then he realized it was written, just a copy that was written by this guy that's claiming, no, I wrote that. It was a copy. It's not an original. And so once he did find out, he still kind of dug his heels in. I can't remember. I saw a documentary on it.
Yeah, it's a guy called Konstantin von Tischendorf. And,
yes, that's it. That's it.
Yeah. And so he went to Mount Sinai in the Arabian desert, and he went to the monastery there, which actually has a mosque in the middle of it, which is quite interesting. And the Sinaiticus was a lot of people think that it was made by a guy called Simonides.
Yes,
so,
that's him. That's him.
Simonides basically. He claimed that he wrote this, and he did it for his uncle Benedict on Mount Athos. And so what happened was, this was going to be a present for the Tsar in Russia to raise money for their church or something like that. But it ended up in Mount Sinai. And so Konstantin von Tischendorf found this and proclaimed it to be the oldest Bible ever.
Yes,
discovered, and on par with Vaticanus and all this sort of stuff. And so, so he took some, because he said that they were going to burn it, and then he went back. I think it was like 15 years later, and he ended up getting the vast majority of this manuscript. Now, there was another Russian guy called Uspensky, and he came along and grabbed some of it as well and took it to Russia. So some of it was in Russia, some of it was in Germany. But when the Russian Revolution happened, they needed money, and so they sold it to the British Library. And so the British Library has quite a lot of it there. It's sitting in their main museum opposite the White Album, the Beatles album. And so a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses love to go and see that manuscript, because it's one of their favorite documents that helps them, because it's an Arian document, anti-Trinitarian document. There's no copies of this manuscript. There's no translations of this manuscript. It's just basically a standalone sort of aberration of history. They say it's from 350 AD, but it could possibly be written by Simonides in 1840. And we've been pushing to get it chemically tested. There are some manuscripts that have been chemically tested. There was one called Archaic Mark.
We know they fake documents. They made them look older, like, because they were trying to come against the scriptures to bring them back to the Pope, to make people stop leaving the Catholic Church.
Yeah, because we have a paper Pope, they say. And so if they can get into the realm of dating is just an art form when it comes to manuscripts. The Alans are very famous in the textual critical world. They had a favorite manuscript called Archaic Mark, and they said it was a 13th century Byzantine manuscript that had a lot of Vaticanus readings in it. So they were very excited about it, because Vaticanus was not copied, it was not translated. It's just another standalone manuscript that's just an aberration.
Yeah, because they wrote it. Because they wrote it to try to pass it off as... That's what I was told anyway.
In 2011... they chemically tested this manuscript, found Prussian blue ink in it, which proves it's a modern day forgery. So it's basically proven to be a forgery, this Archaic Mark. They haven't tested Sinaiticus yet. They haven't tested Vaticanus yet, but we're pushing for these, because just like with evolution, we know they push the dates right back, and you got a bone that's a million years old all of a sudden. And so this is the type of game that people play with the oldest and best manuscripts. Erasmus said that Vaticanus is probably a back translation of a Latin manuscript, and he said it was most likely tampered with in the 1340 council at Florence. And so he actually said it was a corruption. It's a counterfeit, and so that's why he didn't use it. And so this Sinaiticus manuscript found in 1844. It's claimed to be written by Simonides, and it's claimed to be a modern day forgery. And so there
were so many documents. They were saying there were letters that they were forging. There were copies of books of the Bible that they were forging, and they were making them look old, whatever chemical process they do to age them, and trying to copy the real ancient ones, and so that the Catholic Church could claim that they had this legitimacy. And we know it's forged. We know a lot of it was forged.
Yeah, and
modern.
And these manuscripts, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, they're supposedly both around 350, 360, but they're so different from each other that if you were to get both of them side by side, Dean John William Burgon, he was a scholar back in Westcott and Hort's day, he said it's easier to find a place where they disagree than where they agree. So people say, oh, the oldest is the best, but they're so different. What you would think, well, they're corruptions. And there are manuscripts we do consider corruptions, like Codex Beza. Theodore Beza actually had it. That's why it's named after him. And he actually said, look, it's pretty corrupt. Don't use it. You know, it's so bad. But these other ones aren't that much different from it, but they've been exalted to the best in the last 150 years.
Is there any overt doctrines that were put in there to try to prop up Catholicism and papacy?
I think they're specifically Catholicism and the papacy. I think, well, most of the apocryphal books come from these manuscripts. And so that's a huge deal in itself with the Roman Catholic Church, because people through the ages have looked at the Apocrypha, but they've always named it. Apocrypha just meant of doubtful authenticity. It's not like when it was in the King James, it was like, these are the doubted books sort of thing. Right.
And I always thought they just were, they said we can't prove these are canon, and some of them have different doctrines that don't line up with the canon scriptures, but they're old and they were read by early Christians. So
they wanted a faithful translation of it as well for the apologetic of people in those days to fight against the Roman Catholics.
Right.
So because the Roman Catholics were doing their own translations and they were translating it corruptly in the way that they wanted. So they did a very accurate translation of the Apocrypha, and so that way they could read it properly. And then after like 5 years, they started printing the King James without the Apocrypha in certain places.
Yeah.
And so and eventually it was just completely discarded.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize it was in there at first.
Yeah, and it's like in the beginning of the King James, it had a big long preface. It had a whole calendar to find Easter forever. It had a whole 50 pages of genealogies. So it wasn't like all the translators just wanted this in there. In a sense, like the genealogy table that was written, made by one of the biggest enemies of the King James translation, a guy called Hugh Broughton. And he hated the translation, but he did 50 pages in the translation. So it's quite an interesting thing. But the Apocrypha, King James himself said, "I'm no papist. I don't follow the Apocrypha. It's a corrupt manuscript."
Oh, that's amazing. That's just amazing. That I was looking at your article on Easter Passover debate. I see why that's happening, because a lot of the Hebrew roots people are coming back, and but we're warned not to, that you don't want to. The Hebrew roots thing actually has gone so far that they're almost putting people back under the law. Paul warned about that. It was happening in the first century. So I understand why this is a big argument. So I'm really glad that you took the time to break it down. I'm reading it now. So I'm
great.
looking at your work on that. That's it's amazing so far.
Yeah, when I wrote that article, I used to follow, I guess it was the New King James, but I thought the King James had a lot of mistakes in it. And so I thought, well, I'll study this Easter thing out. And I came to the conclusion that the King James was absolutely correct. And I actually didn't know that much. And I had to educate myself to come up to the point where I understood the level of the King James translators. So the word Pascha appears 29 times in the Bible. It's translated once as Easter, but that's the only place where it's after the resurrection. Every other time is before the resurrection, and it's Passover. And so for the Jews, they're doing the old shadow and type, the killing the actual lamb, when the lamb is risen. The English word Easter comes from German Auferstehung, which means resurrection. So the English word Easter actually means resurrection.
See, I didn't know that. I was told it meant from Ishtar.
Uster. Yeah.
Okay. That's great, because now I feel better saying it, because I was feeling condemned. So I always say Happy Resurrection Day.
Yeah,
that's why I'm reading it.
Too, yeah. And now I say Happy Easter, and I say it really loud.
Good, because I I'm not a Hebrew roots or anything, but when somebody told me, they was like, I don't want to say a pagan person's name, so I did that. But resurrection,
that's why I say Happy Resurrection.
Great. Yep. So I'm fine with it.
Easter's like pagan.
That's what I thought, but it actually isn't. Not if the word itself, it's not, if it doesn't derive from Ishtar, which was fertility rituals and bunnies and eggs, that's what that came from, but it shouldn't be attached to the word Easter, right? It shouldn't be attached to that.
It's just what we call a homophone, which is a similar sounding word. It's like Jesus rose from the dead doesn't mean he got a rose from a garden.
I got it.
Yeah, it shouldn't be attached to it, but I mean that's what it derives from, right? That's what Easter derives from, right? Ishtar, the fertility rituals. And all
that. It derives from the German
it's
word
it's a non sequitur. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for Nick in a second. If you.
Hey, I see. I left because the room it was full, and so now there's room for another person to join, and I am here.
Good to see you.
Yeah, we got Nick in the house, man. He's awesome with the manuscripts. I had a question for Nick.
Yeah, he's fascinating.
With the Greek.
Yeah, that makes me feel a lot better, because I thought so too, guys. You were asking that question. I thought so too. So I'm so grateful that he explained that, and I can pass that on. Do you mind if I tell my viewers about this article as it is? Like, I can just give them the link to that. Are you fine with that?
Yeah, if you go to Easter AU, it's one word, easterau.com. It's the I've got 2 videos there as well, which is basically me reading through the articles with pretty pictures, and the videos are better, because when I was doing the videos, I realized I could word this a bit different, and so the videos are easier to watch than to read through it.
That's great. I will put the link up and let them know.
Yeah, cheers.
And I'm going to make sure I tell them that I was mistaken about that word.
So Nick, like the text, okay, so the Textus Receptus, the line that goes specifically through the KJV, that's part of that's part of the overall family of Byzantine scriptures, right? Am I correct on that?
Yes. So the Textus Receptus is it's the Byzantine text, but we understand the Byzantines, like even the Septuagint, is corrupted. They're all the Orthodox Church. The Byzantine Church, their Old Testament doesn't match the Hebrew everywhere, and we all sort of know that. So we also understand that their New Testament had a few issues in it, like 1 John 5:7 dropped out of it. There was a bunch of things that happened to it. So thankfully, we look at 3 things within what we call the closed class of witnesses. We look at the Greek, we look at the Latin, and we also look at the early church writers and what they have to say about the situation. So the Greek corrects the Latin polishes the Greek, but these decisions are decided by also looking at the early church writers and what they had and what they said about the text as well.
Awesome. So the KJV line, does that go specifically to Antioch? Because I've heard people say that of the Byzantine line, that this is why we are KJV, is because it went to Antioch. Is that more of just a speculation?
There is this view of the 2 streams Bible. It is quite simplistic. Basically, if we think that every Bible has, like every Greek Bible has pretty much the Byzantine, there's 99.9% of the manuscripts back up the King James. There's only about 50 that don't, in a sense where they would be used by the people in Munster to make the Nestle Aland 28th edition that came out in 2013. so there's about 50 manuscripts that are different, but within the Byzantine ones, they're considered cohesive. They're considered very similar, and oftentimes in the modern Greek text of the Academy, they just regulate this to an M for a majority text or a BYZ for Byzantine, and it might be 1,000 manuscripts, because most of the time you get a Byzantine manuscript from anywhere and you put it next to another Byzantine manuscript, they're pretty much reading the same. And so it's almost like because you couldn't even put Vaticanus and Sinaiticus in the same family, but they do. They call them Alexandrian manuscripts, but they're so different. And Hermann Hoskier, he said that there was over 3,000 differences just in the Gospels in Vaticanus and Sinaiticus when he compared them. And there were 17 other criteria that he could have used to examine these manuscripts, and there would have been so many more differences, but he basically just did a simple look at it and found 3,000.
Wow. Wow, that's a huge number, man. Wow.
Yeah.
And with the KJV, I mean, there's just a few that I know of that people, I mean, like the one in Revelation 22, maybe the one in Revelation 16, Easter, and then maybe the unicorn. I think people say that the unicorn is another corrupt translation. What would you say to that one?
Yeah, a unicorn, the scientific name for a unicorn is unicornus. Actually, what is it? It's Rhinoceros unicornus. And so it's basically an Indian rhino, a one-horned rhinoceros. And so in the King James actually had a footnote in Isaiah that said, or rhinoceros. So a rhinoceros is basically an old way of saying, or it's a rhinoceros. And so they didn't say it was a mythical thing. They clearly said, they just called it a unicorn back then. That was just a common name that people were saying a rhinoceros is. One, corn is your nose. It's just this one-horned animal. And so they said it was a unicorn, and they had in the marginal note, or rhinoceros. That's just another way of saying it. It's just a synonym.
Wow, that is fantastic. I had no idea. I thought, so I've heard from people, oh, this is just mythology. And so I'm glad that was cleared up. There was one other one, though, like, let's say, the word diakonos in the Greek, deacon, and I forget her name now, but was it Phoebe? I think Phoebe. Yeah.
It's the same word used for Phoebe, but they translate it servant. Diakonos.
Yeah, they put servant there.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good translation, servant, or do you think it should be deaconess or something like that?
I do know this case. Usually when these ones come up, because there's hundreds of these places where everyone's looking at. Usually I go to Will Kinney's website, Brand Plucked, and he's usually already done an article on it.
What's his name? I want to write it down.
I'll put it in the chat there.
Yeah, Will Kinney. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just type in deacon. It's not coming up.
Some kind of diakonolanos or something. I'm terrible at the Greek.
And there's another website too called KJVtoday.net. And this is a friend of mine. He chooses to remain anonymous because you get into these realms and, people will just pull you over the coals. And he's a very smart guy. So if you go to KJVtoday.net, he's got lots of articles about these types of topics and so-called contradictions in the Bible and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't give you an answer on the deacon thing just right now because because I sort of know what's been answered. I usually try and specialize in things that no one's answered before.
Right.
Like the Revelation 16:5 thing and the Easter thing. I try to keep on top of all that. But that's become pretty popular now, the Easter concept.